Welcome back, of course, to talk more about the issues that played out in the city of Johannesburg. We are now joined by political analyst Asanda Ngoasheng, as well as Sanusha Naidu, who's also a political analyst, just to break down, the discussions surrounding what has taken place over the past 2 days with the acting mayor, Kenny Kunene. Ladies, thank you so much for joining me here on the late edition. Of course, I'm sure you were listening in on our conversation with Kenny Kunene a bit earlier on. Maybe perhaps let's start with you, Asanda. What is your initial reaction to the manner and the approach in which these evictions or these demolitions were being done? Kenny Kunene says that, these flats or buildings many people are living in were living basically in unhealthy conditions. What do you have to say about the manner in which he approached this problem in the city of Johannesburg? Asanda?
I think it's important and it's within government's right to intervene when there are things like hijacked buildings, and to intervene when people are living in unsavory and situations that don't meet health and safety standards. And so I don't think there's any issue with them going there or any issue with them even getting engaged and trying to understand what's going on there. But I do think that, his manner, considering that some of the people that he's speaking to may be victims of these owners of hijacked buildings themselves, and are also in some ways not there by choice, but rather because they obviously can't afford to be in buildings that cost a lot more. And so it is in some ways, criminalizing people who are poor. And there are human rights concerns that need to be taken in place when you are going to run an operation like this. They're supposed to have social welfare. They're supposed to have, all the various state entities that deal with people who are poor and who are finding themselves in these, unsafe conditions. And I'm sure there's also children in there who also need to be dealt with according to the statutes of the law. And I saw some of the videos, and I don't know if Kenny Kunene handled himself in the best way there, particularly because that's, the role of the police is to ensure, for instance, that if the guy is refusing to give the numbers that would give the contact, then the police should take over and do what they need to do in order to get those numbers, or have him arrested if there's something to arrest, the caretaker with, because essentially he is an accessory to a crime, because hijacking a building is a crime. And so I think while he was well within his rights to be there and was well within his rights to join such an operation, I think he may have overstepped his boundary in some way.
And Sanusha, if I can bring you in here, a lot of people are questioning whether the manner in which this was done was not in a dignified way. I mean, in one video, we even saw some people even asking if, there are still people inside one of the buildings that they were demolishing there. What is your take on that issue?
Good evening, Bali, and good evening to Asanda and to the viewers. I think, like Asanda says, it is something that needs to be done in a manner that is based on how it's done with dignity and with a level in which you don't infringe people's rights. And I think the challenge right now is when you hear Mr. Kunene, you hear that he's very much about trying to eradicate what he sees as a debilitating, destabilizing effects within that context. But I think at the same time, you've got to be much more aware of people's rights, much more aware of what it means in terms of going in and trying to sort out these derelict buildings, sort out what he says are really uninhabitable spaces in there. And I think to a large extent, it should be done in the context of what does this mean within the human rights context. So I think that there's the one issue here that kind of extends to the fact that you have the whole challenge around the fact that people are homeless, or even if the people are homeless, there's not enough living space, and whatever living space people can find, they are going to inhabit it. But it doesn't mean that the living space they're inhabiting is necessarily fit for purpose or has a dignified kind of alignment to it. So I think at the end of the day, we can see where Mr. Kunene is coming from, because it's really around an urban renewal. But at the same time, I think you've got to respect the dignity and human rights of those people who are going to be evicted, who are being evicted from those spaces in a manner that does not come across as crass and delegitimizes their rights and their human credibility.
And Asanda, one cannot help to ask that we are approaching indeed the 2024 elections, and some may say that what we have seen over the past 2 days with the acting mayor, some are even calling it a political stunt, and they're trying to score political points. When it comes to election season approaching, what do you have to say about one would say and characterize it as, populist messages being sent out, especially during such a crucial time in our country?
Yeah, I'm not surprised, because we are a couple of months away, essentially, from 2024, which is an election. And so every political party is going to use every single opportunity that it has where it is under the spotlight to promote and to show their party as the one that South Africans should be voting for. And you'll see that some of the people in that video were there on official state capacity, but they were wearing their political party regalia, which is something that we shouldn't be seeing, because you're either there on a state visit or you're there in your capacity as a political party. And there should be a very clear there should be a very clear definition and a clear line between what is party activities and what is official state activities. And so although Kenny Kunene was there as the acting mayor, and the various other people were there in their capacity within the city of Johannesburg governance structure, they were very much and very clearly hinting and very clearly kind of posturing themselves according to the political party that they are part of. And I'm not surprised that this kind of campaign happened to take place coincidentally at the time when he was going to be mayor, and therefore have the most, spotlight on him. And I think that, the EFF put the clause in with the ANC agreement that the ANC will have to give mayorship to small political parties in order to give these small political parties, presumably then if they can as the EFF, but also the others, the opportunity to campaign and to canvass using the kind of, spotlight that a mayorship would get. And so I'm not surprised that what has happened, and we're going to see a lot more of that. And on the one hand, it may look like and it may feel like there's a lot of delivery that's happening and finally things are starting to happen. But on the other hand, it can have a lot of detrimental effects, in the sense that if everybody is out on the streets doing this political campaigning, who is ensuring that the signatures that are needed by the people who are public servants in order to ensure that real service delivery, the one that takes place without cameras, actually takes place, and that the citizens of Johannesburg are able to receive the services that they need? Because the city of Johannesburg has literally been in a stalemate for quite a long time with all these changing governments. And that is a big concern, that, are we just seeing governments chopping and changing and everybody posturing, rather than actually ensuring that the citizens get the services that they pay for and that they actually expect from the political parties that they initially would have voted for.
And Sanusha, would you say that this was done in the interests of Johannesburg residents, or like what Asanda is saying here, that one would say that this is a political season, it's basically campaigning for the 2024 elections?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard not to draw that conclusion or draw that correlation, particularly because at the end of the day, we are entering that home stretch in terms of the election campaigns. We see political parties utilizing their issues around the debate, the question of the Joburg Metro, the question of the Tshwane Metro, trying to ensure that they actually have some kind of performance that they are basically going to be ruling, or they're going to be in power. So they're going to basically come out with all guns blazing. They're going to come out and they're going to basically start shooting from the hip. And whatever they're going to see that's going to use their ability to do that, it's going to be on the basis of to say, well, this is what we can do. This is what we can deliver. If it is about homeless people, they're going to try and find ways and means to address that situation. If it is about dealing with derelict buildings, cleaning up the urban center, going in and trying to be much more gung-ho than before in terms of trying to provide better service delivery. Those are going to be key avenues that political parties are going to utilize at their disposal to try and shore up votes for next year's election. The challenge, however, is the 2021 local government election has showed that we also sit in a very, very invidious and dangerous, if not precarious, situation when it comes to these kinds of approaches to the election outcome. And I think at the end of the day, what's going to be critical as well in this election is, apart from the populist politicking that will take place, it's also the question of independence, because independents have also now have some kind of traction to go out and also start putting up their election strategy, their election campaign, their electioneering slogans, and so forth. And it's going to be either one individual or two individuals that are going to contest at provincial level and national level, or they're going to basically have to deal with this kind of politicking that takes place from the bigger parties. So it's not just the parties that we know, it's also those new entrants, including new parties that have been formed more recently, that are now also going to enter the fray and become much more, I would say, much more driven, much more animated, and much more kind of hands-on in inverted commas, because at the end of the day, it's about who gets the biggest slice of the pie and who gets the votes from the electorate.
All right, then. Thank you very much. That is indeed Sanusha Naidu there speaking, as well as Asanda Ngoasheng, political analyst. Thank you so much for joining us here this evening on The Late Edition. Of course, they were reacting to what has taken place in the city of Johannesburg, especially looking at those 2 days when the MMC for Transport, Kenny Kunene, took over as acting mayor.